Hello, welcome back. Mike from Canavan Wealth. Today we are talking about birth rate in the U.S. and why it should matter to you. Uh, if you are new to the channel, because my viewership has just very recently dramatically gone up, I will talk about the channel at the end. I'm just going to jump into the video here, but welcome and thank you for kind of showing me some of your support. So let's start. This is a great article. It just came out on the Wall Street Journal. Most of these links will be in the description below, talking about birth rate in America. And if you're a longtime viewer of the channel, you know fertility rates are one of the things that I love talking about because it has a dramatic impact on economies. I talk about it in India, China, and now we're going to talk about it in the US. And I've certainly talked about it before. So this is a graph of births and deaths. So the top on the line is the number of people being born in pure numbers. This is not a percentage or a rate, and the number of people dying. So and this goes back to the 30s. So this is the surge of the baby boomers, right? This is birth rate jumped after World War II. And then we see a big decline here in the 70s, and then it's been relatively level, right? This is not zero at the bottom, so there's a little bit of a gap on this scale. But we've been in a steady decline since 2007. A decline that we've certainly seen before, a decline in here, decline obviously through here after the baby boomers. Deaths have been steadily getting bigger. That's just because the population has still been growing through all of this. So we would expect more people to be dying each year because the population is getting bigger. But that's an important reason to understand that if during all of this, US population was growing, and yet for, let's say, back to 1970, total number of births have largely been staying the same. Recently, we've been seeing kind of this steady decline. Now, there's nothing to say it may not jump back up here. This is very important when we go down and look at the fertility rate to understand if the populations continue getting bigger, we would at least expect births to be trending like this, which is generally up, right? Because the population's getting bigger. So we expect the total number of kids to be being born would be getting bigger, but it's not happening. It's staying the same. That's because of this, which is fertility rate. So the fertility rate is how many kids does your average woman have? We're going to talk about traditional relationships here of just two people having kids. And since 1972, the fertility rate has not gone above what they're calling here the replacement level. Now, they're saying the replacement level is 2.1, largely because if you die early, right, if you don't die in your 60s, 70s, 80s, 90s, then it kind of screws up the numbers. And you'd need to have actually about 2.1 people in order to maintain a healthy population, a population that stays the same. And since really 2006, fertility rates have been steadily declining, really below numbers we've never really seen in the modern US. And this is normal. This is like every developed nation looks like this. This is not just a US thing. This is happening in Europe, China, India, Japan. This is like 1.2. Don't quote me on that number. You can look it up. But there are some places that really, really struggle with. South Korea is like this. So fertility rates declining like this means that we are not having enough kids our population is going to start getting shaped like this at the bottom, right? Our population right now is still growing, but that's because there's a 70-year lag between when people are born and when they die. But effectively 70 years from this, which is not that long ago, we are going to hit this curve where we start getting smaller. And honestly, that's going to happen most likely well before that, just because of how far this is declining in terms of birth rate, right? The difference between 1.6 and 2.1 is a big deal for population. The rest of this goes on. This talks about fertility rates by race and ethnicity. I think the important thing this chart makes it look dramatic between the races, but this chart does not start at zero, right? If you charted this from 0 to 100, these lines would be a lot closer. They would be a lot more straight and generally trended down. So yes, have we seen a little bit of an uptick in Hispanic, Asian, and I think they also mentioned Pacific Islander in here, but that's a very small percentage of our population, unlike the other two. That I think that's probably background noise in terms of statistics. But All right, and then another really interesting chart is birth rate by age group from 1990 to present. For example, teens, for every 1,000 teens, there used to be 60 kids born in 1990. Yeah, that's when I was I was 10 in 1990. So, and now it's down to 12 and a half. And then you see the only age group you see going up is the 30s, 20s going down. Anybody over 30, it's actually been going up. And this is not surprising as well, which is we've been pointing to the fact a lot that the increase in childcare costs and down payments on homes, 401ks versus pensions. This is all from my webinar a couple of months ago called The New Middle Class. Very good. I'll try and link that. Talks about why people are having kids later in life and the economic impacts that that's going to be having, on the world and on generational wealth and all sorts of things. So, not surprising here, but again, we see these trends lines generally trending down to what we would expect based on fertility rates. So, why is this important, right? Because a lot of people might be like, "There's too many people in the world. That's great. Less of them is better." If you like or are counting on Social Security, then this is a big issue. And it's a big issue everywhere, not to mention just the economy relies on a reliable labor source that it is not going to be getting in the future, right? So let's go back to the first one, which is Social Security. Social Security has always worked the way I'm about to describe. It's not that the government has screwed it up or anything else. And a lot of times the media will try to imply to you that the government has somehow screwed up Social Security, and that's why it's not going to be there or pay as much. They have done nothing to Social Security to change what I'm about to talk about. Social Security works that the people that are receiving their benefits, the money for those benefits come from the people who are currently paying taxes. It does not work that all of the taxes you paid into it gets put in some special account for you, like invested and grown. And then when you're eligible to draw on it, they start giving it back to you like a 401k or something like that. It's not how it works. It's always been the plan. The people that are currently working and paying Social Security taxes, that money is used to pay Social Security benefits for those that have retired, right? And that relies on a healthy working population paying Social Security taxes. And it also relies on people who are receiving Social Security to kind of live an expected lifetime. And when the program was first designed, you retired at 65. And the simple truth is that most people had passed by 75. They were in the system for on average, maybe 10 years or something, right? Now, most people retire later, 65, 67, maybe 70. But many of them are living into their 80s and 90s. So not only is there more money being paid out to those who are in retirement for a substantially longer amount of time, but the workforce is starting to shrink. The number of people who are paying those taxes is shrinking. And this is why when you hear about Social Security, people talk about its longevity risks and things like that. And I'm going to talk about a number of politically charged things here. But one thing, and I'll explain why that is. Any politician who is telling you that they don't plan on making any changes to Social Security, that is code for we are going to wait until it starts to fail, right? So whichever side you don't like, understand that if your side is also saying we're not going to make any changes, or often they refer to it as cuts to Social Security, that is code for we're just going to wait 10 years until it fails. Right? So if you want someone to do something about Social Security, you have to go out and support someone who is saying, I need, a change needs to be made. And one of those changes may be more taxes, less benefits, right? But otherwise, and I've got other videos on this, it is headed towards a problem. Things need to be done. Okay. Relatively simple things. These are not dramatic changes that need to happen to Social Security. Don't take this as a freak out video. I am not try and worry you to the ends of the earth. All right, so there's no better way to drive away a whole bunch of new subscribers and viewers than to talk about politically charged topics. And what could be more politically charged these days than immigration? This is something we've covered on the channel before, so some of my viewers already know my thoughts on immigration. This is another very good article. This is talking about the immigrant share of U.S. labor force grows to a new high. But first, let's understand what is going on with U.S. unemployment. So these are the unemployment numbers as represented by Google here. You can just Google it and you can see them yourself. The unemployment rate is down at 3.4%. This is its history. This is obviously COVID. We go through this big spike. Numbers come back down. This is the global financial crisis where unemployment comes back down to kind of record lows. This is before the global financial crisis. This is a little bit coming off the dot-com crash. You can see we are at what I refer to as background noise of unemployment. I mean, unemployment is so low. It is unlikely that it will really ever go below a level like this. This is effectively people in between jobs or for whatever reason can't find a job, most likely due to something that they're preferentially selecting away from, right? It's unlikely we're going to see unemployment below this level, meaning the world and the labor market is starved for people to do the jobs. And I do talk to a lot of people who are like, that can't be right. People are just lazy or things along those lines. It's it's not my world experience. Before I became a financial advisor, I worked for a potato processing company as an engineer. And there's a lot of potato processors around here who my friends work at, and they cannot hire people to do anything, drive forklifts, run their lines, anything along this. Go talk to restaurants. There's a small town here in Idaho and Victor that I know pretty well for various reasons. And the restaurants in that town, it's kind of like a little resort town, literally had to get together and organize which nights they were going to be open in order to share the bartenders, waitresses, and cooks that they could find. This is like competing restaurants being like, okay, you be open Friday and I'll be open Saturday. And Susie, Tom, Maria, and Sherry, they work for both of us. And that way we can keep our restaurant open and we're not just trying to steal the labor from each other. That's how bad it's gotten. Talk to anyone in the construction industry. They can't get people to reliably show up to work, right? We've been measuring unemployment in the same way for years. Is there errors in the way we measure it? Almost certainly. Anyone who tells you that there's no errors in the way you measure anything is lying to you. But this is the reality that we are facing. There are not enough workers for all the jobs we need them to do, right? And is artificial intelligence and automation and things going to replace some of those workers? Yeah, absolutely. And good, we need it, right? The accounting firms, you can go back in the wall in my Mike Reads the Journal. They're going to be short like 60,000 accountants this year. Good thing that AI is going to start replacing accountants because we aren't making enough of them to do the job that we need because the world's population is going through exactly what we're going through right now, where it's becoming top heavy, right? And the simple truth is that, at least here in the US, automation, self-driving forklifts, things like that, and artificial intelligence programs don't pay Social Security taxes. Now, some places they do, actually. There's places, mostly in Europe, I think, where if you automate jobs, you end up actually having to pay taxes on them like they're employees because they've recognized this problem, right? Anyway, so let's jump. I'm just going to run through the numbers and then I'm going to talk about immigration. So bear with me. If you feel so emotionally one way or another about immigration, let's just look at the numbers. Understand the numbers in this really need to be understood because they are presented in a way that I think is intended to be shocking. And Wall Street Journal usually does a really good job about presenting things in a proper way. But so here, total growth in the workforce, and they make this look like foreign-born workers are just exploding compared to native-born. That's not the case. This is total growth in their own workforce, right? So this is not effectively the foreign-born workforce has increased by 6%, whereas the native-born workforce has increased by 1%. That's not shocking. Our birth rates are awful, so the fact that we're not growing, the fact that we're growing at all is impressive, right? foreign-born workforce we would expect to be going up. This counts all types of, it's right here, include legally admitted immigrants, refugees, temporary residents such as students, and immigrants lacking permanent legal status. So that's gone up. There's better numbers down here. So this is participation rate. And again, this is super misleading because they put the numbers right. This is saying that back in 2021, 65% of foreign-born people in the US were in the workforce versus 61% of native-born people. This makes complete sense that that's higher because immigrants tend to be younger, right? They're coming here typically to work. They're not coming here to retire. Nobody moves to the US to retire. I think very few people. So 61% of the natives work, 65% of the foreign-born people work. This is not saying that 3% more of the workforce or anything along that line. Compares it to some other things that aren't particularly interesting. So this is occupations share of total employed. So this is effectively saying that 36% of foreign-born people work in this profession, 14% work in sales and office. This is not saying 36% of management is foreign-born. This is saying 36% of foreign-born people are in management. And the more meaningful one is to compare it like this. So this is saying 45% of native-borns work in management, 36% of foreign-born. So foreign-born dramatically compared against themselves work in service, construction, and transportation. All the places we cannot find people to work, right? There's been a number of articles and everything coming out about white-collar jobs they are going through an employment crunch, a tech job, but not like what we're seeing. Go talk to anyone who runs a construction firm. The number one reason they can't build the house you want them to is because they can't get labor. Okay. I think there's some more here. This is talking about median weekly earnings. So your average native-born earns about 10% more if you look at that. And then it breaks it down by ethnicity. Not a whole lot there. Native-born whites and Asian tend to make the same or more, whereas Black and Hispanic, tend to earn a little less. I'm not touching the reasons for that with a 10-foot pole, so not catching me. And growth despite pandemic disruption. So, the whole issue at the southern border. I did a video on immigration in the southern border, really where I educated myself because I didn't know anything about it. I am not claiming that the southern border is not a really big problem, right? However, we need workers. We need workers to come in, fill the jobs that are not being filled, and to pay Social Security taxes is really when the economics of it come down to. So this is a politically charged topic, right? And what I want to say, and I got this from both of these books, so Factfulness and How to Good Economics for Hard Times. I talk about these books a lot, and I've done some reviews. These are fantastic books, but this one specifically points out that, as well as Factfulness, it is normal to be fearful of immigration in cultures that are not yours, and that's normal. It's not racist. You're not a bigot if you worry about immigration. In fact, every country in the world, the population generally doesn't like the idea of immigration. However, the economics of it, when you really get into it, and these guys won the Nobel Prize for economics largely by going through 40 years of economic studies and writing a summary. And they are not quick to draw conclusions. In fact, most of this book says, look, this is the data. It's not very conclusive. We kind of think one way on this, but this other one, I would tell you, anyone who thinks they understand macroeconomics, I guarantee there's something in here that will change your mind. For example, if you're a little left or liberal leaning, read their sections in here about government assistance and things like that, specifically in developed nations like our own. I think you would be surprised to see what the data says about it. And But the one thing, it's the first chapter in the book that they're like, no, the data is pretty darn convincing. It's about immigration and the fact that most of the worries around immigration, that a large pool of unskilled laborers will drive down what people make, meaning natives will make less because they're competing against people who are willing to work for less, or that there's some giant amount of money being spent on them to support them. It's simply not the case. In fact, it's almost the other way, in that when a large population moves to an area and are able to work, they spend that money almost entirely in their local economy, which stimulates their local economy in a very favorable way. Economists have known for a long time, the more flexible labor is, the more able they are to move around, the better it is for both the employer and the laborer. Right? This is one of the reasons we got rid of the pension system, although I'm not all that big of a fan of the 401k system as a replacement for the pension system. One of the reasons we got there. So now, are there all sorts of other concerns around immigration's legality, illegality, things along those lines? Yeah, there is, and I'm not going to make a video on that. It would be a political quagmire. However, the reality of our situation, and none of these numbers are anything that are people dispute or are worried about, right? This is fertility rates and where people are working. We need the labor in the US, and it is very unlikely that we are going to fix the fertility rate. We have years of data. Europe, I'm going to jump to Europe in a minute. Europe is ahead of us on this several years, right? Their fertility rates have been declining, their population has declined. I wish I could have found the article, but I was reading an article probably a month ago talking about how Europe just went through this giant migrant crisis, refugees caused by all the turmoil in the Middle East, as well as a lot of people from sub-Saharan Africa coming up trying to immigrate to the European Union. And Europeans were freaking out about it, just like we freak out about all of the immigration from South America. And again, it is my opinion that it is normal to be concerned about immigration, right? For lots of reasons that we could talk about for days. But this article was actually about the governments themselves coming around to the fact that they kind of realized, oh my gosh, this almost saved us, right? Europe was in decline. They came out of 2008 in shambles, and they just couldn't get moving again. They really, really struggled. And then they got this influx of labor, and Europe is doing actually really, really well now, right? A lot of people are saying that they're going to be outcompeting the US for the coming years. I'll believe it when I see it. And this is Eurozone government debt, as it should be looked at, which is percentage of GDP, which is effectively its ability to grow. Now, this is the COVID, right? They spent money like we did. It was in decline before that. It was up. Their GDP to U.S. government debt per GDP has been on a steady decline. Now, again, put this on a real scale from zero, not from 77.5. It looks like it went to zero here, but this is going to not look as dramatic as it is. But the fact that it's even leveling out, let alone going down, is very impressive. So I wish I could have found that article. I looked for like an hour before I was able to do it. But the leaders of their economists and the politicians are like, oh, this was kind of a blessing in disguise, all of this immigration, right? All right, I'm going to stop talking about this politically charged topic and kind of jump back to what we were originally talking about, which is birth rate in the U.S. You can't do anything about this, right? This is just the type of things that I look at to think about what is the economy, what is the future potential of the U.S. economy. This is a very slow process, but this is going to be a major driver of how the world economies shape up in the next 10 to 30 years. It is who is going to be able to maintain the labor force to support the social systems that they've built. Now, if you don't think Social Security should even exist, and we've gone to socialist, and this is, that's a line of thought that I'm not going to call crazy, but it's not the situation we're in. And I think for the most part, Social Security has been a big win for our country and for our aging population. So I am of the opinion that Social Security is a good program that is worth saving, but that we are going to have to figure out. And that immigration, no matter what your thoughts on it are, is a vital, vital component to our labor force. All right. I am Mike from Canavan Wealth. If you are new to the channel and you like the video, please do like it. It helps a lot of things. Consider subscribing for future content. I do webinars each month that I kind of release and then do kind of an in-person kind of question and answer period for those webinars. You can get all of that from canavanwealth.com. I do not have comments turned on because you cannot really have comments in videos in the financial services industry because I'm practicing financial advisor. So if you do have any questions or concerns, or you can just email me at mike@canavanwealth.com, which is, you can also get to all of that from the website. And otherwise, thank you for joining the channel, and I will talk to you soon.